Welcome to One Quick Question with Infomedia, your source for answers to your questions about websites, digital marketing, and more. I'm your host, Carrie Rollwagon. Today's episode is from one of our live One Quick Question events. So for the next few months, One Quick Question is coming to you live here in Birmingham. So if you're in Birmingham, we'd love to have you join us. We meet the third Thursday of most months at Little Professor in Pepper Place. We have coffee from June Roasters and tacos from Ladybird, so it's really fun. It's usually 10 o'clock in the morning, so it's a good time when you've just gotten to your desk and you don't want to be there to head over to Pepper Place and do something that still counts as work, but you get free breakfast, a little bit of networking, and a little bit of information too. And at our live events, we do a deep dive into each topic, which is what we always do here on the podcast. But at the live events, you also have a chance to ask your questions from the speaker as we record. So our June live event is coming up, and that will feature a panel of experts from Infomedia because our topic is going to be AI. And I know AI has been in the news a lot lately. And it's kind of a moving topic, right? Like we hear different things and those things change and then there are new things. So instead of drilling down into like one specific thing, we wanted to kind of give you an overview. So we'll have our creative director, Caleb Chancey, there to talk about AI as it relates to design and photography and video. We'll have Pam Sanderson there, and Pam's been on the podcast before, and she's going to be looking at it just from an overall kind of holistic perspective for your business and for your website. And I will also be there to talk about AI as it relates to writing. So grab your ticket in the show notes to this episode or anywhere you find Infomedia. But on today's episode, this is a recording from our live event with Caleb Chancey. Caleb was talking about when Squarespace is not enough. So at Infomedia, we know that there is definitely a place for using Squarespace and Wix and page builders and things like that. But we know that you also kind of can run up against a wall when you're using a page builder like this. So Caleb talks about when to know, yes, this is still the right tool for me, and when it's time to maybe look for something else. The live audience was really engaged and loved this one, and I hope you will too. So here's Caleb.
Please. My name's Caleb Chancey. I'm a creative director at Infomedia. Like she said, I was a creative director at a magazine for 2 years before being at Infomedia. And then I was also a freelance photographer and a musician for about 15 plus years before that. That's my pedigree, y'all. Also, if you're gonna remember what I look like today, it's probably this. It's holding my kids upside down. They're screaming with joy, don't worry. I'm a great, great father. I'm gonna talk about Squarespace today, which is, like Carrie said, kind of interesting because if you view what we do at Infomedia, you might think Squarespace is the enemy. And they're really not. It's been kind of amazing, my relationship with Squarespace over the years. And so I want to talk today about when I think it's great and when I think it's kind of lacking. And we'll go into that a little bit. But first, we're going to go on a little time travel back to 2007. 2007 was a fantastic year. It's when the iPhone debuted. It's when the Spice Girls had their reunion tour after not performing for 10 years. How did we survive? I don't know. Deathly Hallows was published, just saying. And I would say equal to the importance of the Deathly Hallows being published in January of that year, CalebChancey.com launched. That's right. I was on the internet. It was amazing. This site was fantastic. It was just one picture. That's all I needed, one picture. It was ballsy, it was beautiful. I was like, hire me. One picture, hire me. That's all they needed to know. A few months later, we added a slider for more because the site was too ballsy and too beautiful and I wasn't getting hired. But it was amazing. This site I hired somebody for this site. I paid $1,200 in 2 payments. And I remember hiring someone early in my career as a photographer And it was the greatest feeling in the world, because when you first start a business, you are doing everything yourself. You are bootstrapping everything. So to get a call from somebody and saying, hey, we're working on your site this week, it just made me feel like king of the world. That's right, and that's from 1997, not 2007, but anyway. So you do everything yourself at the beginning of business, and that can be really amazing. But there's also times where you need help. And so I learned that lesson early on with a website, but then I quickly forgot that lesson, because a few years later I just said, you know what? I bet I can design a better site myself. And I got my friend Bob, and we're like, hey, this isn't just gonna be a slider. It's gonna have movement, it's gonna have texture, it's gonna be amazing. And in 2011, we designed the new site. Wait, sorry if you can't read that. We designed the new site. That's right, in 2011, we went hard in the paint with Flash, which was a bad choice. It was not a good choice, especially because, like I said earlier, in 2007, the iPhone had launched that didn't support Flash. But we thought two things. We thought, oh, they'll catch up. Those simple Appletons, they're going to support Flash at some point. We also thought, man, who's going to view a photography website on a phone? You want those things bigger. It doesn't even matter. Milk was a bad choice. Just saying. So what we did after that is, when Squarespace started to really come into its own, was around 2014. They'd been around since the early 2000s, but they started doing heavier advertising around that point. And since 2014, I had transitioned over to Squarespace, and I've been a Squarespace user ever since 2014. So I'm going on almost 10 years of using Squarespace for my portfolio. It's amazing. It has been an incredible experience for me as a photographer. I can update it really easily. The backend system to update's really, really simple. It's been great. And sure, I'm on page 27 of Google because, you know, why not? And they didn't tell me what to do with that, so I just put up pictures, but whatever. It is an incredible platform for this. And so today I'm not gonna speak anti-Squarespace. My hope is that I can kind of show you when it's great and when you might not be the client for it. And I mainly want to talk to it because the broader Squarespace's messaging gets, the more they're trying to open up their base. And what I've seen is that there's a lot of marketing language that they're talking about, like, hey, we're a website that builds websites. You want a website? You can come to our website. We'll give you a website. It'll be great. Squarespace alone is not a great solution. You need to have a lot of things going into it to prepare you for it. And there's still that bootstrap mentality for a lot of people, that when we tell them, hey, this is how long it's gonna be for us to make your site a custom site, or this is how much it's gonna cost, there's that in the back of their mind. You know, for $20 a month, my nephew could build me a pretty great site. And they might be able to, but like I'm gonna say, there's some things that go into it. So the rest of this talk is going to be in the format of an early 2000 hero, Jeff Foxworthy. You might be a redneck but this is going to be Squarespace is not enough when. So the first is, Squarespace is not enough when you need strategy. So what do I mean by strategy? Squarespace is not going to tell you the choices that you're making are the best ones. They actually have a philosophy that's kind of counter to what we do at Infomedia, and it's a philosophy that I actually adhered to for many, many years not knowing, which is, instead of strategy first, it was design first, where the primary thing that I wanted to do was to make a cool looking site. I wanted it to be really, really like eye-catching. It didn't matter if it did what I wanted it to do. I didn't even ask the question, what do I want my customer to do first? I would hide the contact button because it was too cluttered in the top navigation. I wasn't asking the right questions. And so Squarespace is not going to be guiding you towards that. They're getting a little bit better with that. This week they actually released Squarespace Blueprint, which guides you through some things. But all of these extra features, that's not what they're known for. And so not a lot of people take advantage of those things. And even that is very general advice. It's not specific to your situation. Their templates are beautiful, But again, it's not something that necessarily fits you exactly. You end up making some compromises that you don't even realize that you're making as you go through it. So Squarespace, I would say, it's not the best when you really need a holistic strategic plan. It can be a great tool for it. But again, alone, it's not going to answer those questions. It's not going to ask you the questions that need to be asked. What do you want the user to do? What is the best way to get them to that point? And thinking through that with you. So Squarespace is not the best solution if you are doing strategy first instead of design first. It's really good if you just want a beautiful site and that's it. But that only takes you so far. Secondly, Squarespace is not enough when you need content. And here's what I mean by that. We have a lot of people come to Infomedia that don't have content. They don't have any words written. They don't have any photos. They don't have any video. And we can guide them through and advise them. But the challenge for a designer is to take what is realistic to the client and make the best out of it. We don't want to promise them the moon, and then when they see it, they go, "This looks incredible." And it's like, great, now you just need to buy photos from us and video and all this stuff. We can give them that advice earlier on, but that's not going to be something we're going to kind of put them in a corner and say, hey, this site only looks good if you do all these other things. Clients are at different points in their life. Sometimes they don't have the budget for it. Sometimes they have NDAs and they work on government projects, so they can't actually show the work that they do. How do you show off a company when you can't show the work that they do? And Squarespace has really amazing solutions for people without content. They're like, hey, we have stock that we've already paid for you. You can just drop it in. You can just do that the whole time. The reason they do that is because their design is so dependent on high-level content and these high-level choices. They want to give you that option. The problem with stock, and we'll get into it with AI and the next time as well, is that if you use that and you're not using it in a unique way, your site will eventually look like 1,200 other sites. You can use stock in a really great way, but again, Squarespace is not going to guide you towards that. But they are going to insist that most of their designs, you do have content, really strong content. You obviously have testimonials from all these people. You obviously have photos. There's a lot of assumptions being made, and there's a lot of blanket solutions that they offer that might not fit you. So if you don't have a ton of content, it might not be the best thing for you. Again, as a photographer, that's all I do, is I generate content and I'm putting it up there online. That's great, but I don't have a lot of words on the site, and that probably would have helped me not be at page 17 on Google, but there's that. So you could get a template that's like this, and this is just straight out the gate, and this looks absolutely beautiful, but you don't have those words, you don't have those photos, you don't have logos, they don't even have those logos. If you don't have that, you can look this and it's like, oh, well, maybe I can manufacture this, or maybe we can make this work, and then you are trying to fit into a template, which might, again, at the beginning of things, that might be where you need to go. But rather than that, there's another way where you can actually start with strategy like earlier and see what you're actually needing and actually wanting to do, and not trying to just fill in the blanks of content because they said to do it. Does that make sense? This is a nods, fantastic. So the third thing is Squarespace might not be enough for you if you need a plugin. I'm not going to talk a ton about this because this is more of a dev thing, but I do know a few things about this. So what's interesting about Squarespace is that their whole idea that they were founded on is we want to make this easy, we want it templated, and so they have plugins. They call them extensions though, and they're vetted ones that basically, if it works on one site, it works on every site, which is an incredible promise for it. They have 31 of these. Okay, that's not a ton. Again, it's great if you need that one thing that extension does. Great, that's fantastic. But what if you wanted it to also do this? What if you wanted a different shopping cart option? What if you wanted it to be a little bit different for that event calendar? That's not something that they offer. They have a very simple kind of structure with what they do. And you can customize certain things within it, but then again, you're getting into custom dev within Squarespace. And so that's kind of a different conversation. We build a lot of our sites within WordPress, and WordPress I think has 58,000 plus plugins. Pros and cons of that: a ton of those plugins are terrible. They don't keep updated. It will break your site. If you need variety, something outside of Squarespace is probably your solution. But again, if you go at it alone, and this is going to be kind of the theme the entire time, no matter what you do, if you go at it alone, you might be making some decisions that aren't the best decisions to make. So talking with a trusted advisor, it doesn't matter if it's Infomedia or not, but saying like, hey, when was the last time this was updated? Do they keep it updated? Is this going to break my site? Is this exactly what I need? Finding that. There's more variety within something like a WordPress. And so if you need a specific plugin, you probably are leaning away towards Squarespace, towards something that's a little bit more custom. So next thing, Squarespace is not enough when you need outside advice. This is a little bit like strategy, but it's a little bit broader. And that's why I did it separately. Also, I needed another point, so I split it up. And to emphasize this, I'm going to show from Dr. Strangelove. I'm just saying, gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room, one of my favorite jokes in the world. If you don't know it, go watch that movie. All right, every year, the US military pays millions and millions of dollars to play war games. Okay? Basically, these elaborate scenarios that PhDs put together and top brass in the military get together and they basically play D&D. All right? Which is awesome, objectively. Why in the world do they do this? Well, they realize something. They realize that the smartest person in the world can't think of an answer to a scenario they can't imagine. You'll get it? They need outside influences that they can't control to ask them questions they would never think to ask. So they need random scenarios. They need to be thinking through what happens if Finland goes to war with Canada, and play it out. What would they do? It seems absurd, but the questions and the processes they develop while solving these absurd questions they never would think to ask themselves is worth everything. They start thinking in ways they would never think of before. So this is where strategy comes in, and strategy is the end result of these conversations. People need outside advice other than in their own head. Again, it's the benefit of not just bootstrapping everything yourself, is asking people, what should I be asking? What should I know? And then someone says, oh, well, what do you want the site to do? Who's your main audience? What's your main product? Now, does your main product control 80% of it? Does it need to be shown higher up on the page? Things like that. It also helps to seeking outside advice. There's a lot of inner office politics between departments that if you were doing this yourself, you may be tempted to show everything as equal because you don't want somebody to yell at you. It's really great having somebody else be the bad guy and say, hey, it's not that we're going to devalue your department and what you do. It's just that realistically, this is our primary client. They go after this one thing. We need to present that first. And so Squarespace might not be the solution for you if you need outside advice. And most of the time, I would say after your first site and getting it, you do need outside advice. And that does yield an incredible strategy. I do messaging guides with a lot of clients. And the end of that thing, it's basically their internal dialogue that they use for some marketing language and things like that. At the end of it, they get a PDF. It's not a super sexy product at the end. But every single person I've done this with, they say, the process was the thing we bought. The process, the way that we walked through this, what we asked. And we talk about this all the time for what we do, is that we want to give people an incredible process through it that they wouldn't be able to manufacture on their own. So outside advice is incredibly important. Again, it's kind of helping people not have to bootstrap everything and giving them a bigger perspective on things. So Squarespace might not be the right tool for you if you need outside advice, and you probably do. The next thing is Squarespace. Oh, look, there's fireworks. This is an effect. It didn't take me that long because it's a drop-down menu. Squarespace is not enough when you are not creative. Now, I agree kind of with Seth Godin. There's a bunch of books back there on this, but everybody's creative to a certain extent. Every single person. You may not view yourself as that, and I totally get that. Making creative decisions is incredibly important with the site because, again, you want to make sure your site doesn't look like everybody else's. And creative decisions with a website, you end up making just a billion tiny decisions the entire time. Do you want the button to be round like your logo? Or do you want it to square edges? What fonts do you need to use? Do you have a brand guide? Do we need to develop one? There's all of these tiny little things that honestly creatives really love, but can kind of be incredibly annoying to a lot of other people. And does it even matter, is the question. So with Squarespace, you are given a ton of tools within that template. And you could launch the template straight away, but again, it would look like 1,200 other people's sites. So you start making these small decisions. And it's gonna go probably two ways within that if you're not an overly creative person. You're either going to make decisions that end up being kind of middle of the road, or you're gonna end up making decisions that have no logic to it whatsoever. You change one thing, but it doesn't make sense over here, it doesn't make sense over here, and it ends up confusing the user. So Squarespace is not necessarily the best thing if you're not a creative person. Again, I'm a photographer, I've used it for years. I love making creative decisions. It's actually my job to make creative decisions. That's awesome. But if you're not that person, that is okay to ask for help within that. And Squarespace does have advisors, which is great that you can reach out to. Again, they're gonna be more of a templated solution within that. So Squarespace is not necessarily enough if you need creative decisions to be made and if you're not that creative person to do it. All right, this next one and the one after it are kind of an A-B as well. Squarespace is not enough when you don't have time to build your own site. It seems pretty obvious, and Squarespace has this thing of, hey, this is fast, this is gonna not take that much time, it takes more time than you think. You have a full-time job. You probably don't have time to build your own site. Again, that is okay if you don't have time to do that. The amount of effort that you put into the site is going to kind of reap rewards within that. And there's that pressure the whole time of, I need to be spending more time on this, I need to be doing this. I'm guilty of this with the magazine that I used to work at. We had a terrible site and I said, I can build a Squarespace site for us in a weekend. And I did. And it was okay. It was kind of better where we were, but when I left, they replaced that site really quickly. And it was a good choice. I'm just saying. I knew what I was doing, but I was dangerous in that way. So there's other things you probably could be doing with your time with that. If that is something you're excited about, it's a fun thing to explore, but you might not have time for it, that's okay. The second part of this is even if you have time to build your own site, do you have time to update your own site? Now the updating on the back end of Squarespace, the CMS, the content management system, is pretty great. It's really, really simple to do, but you might not have the time to do it. And maybe you thought this is a fast solution to get us a better looking site, and then it just sits there for a year. And then you realize, oh my gosh, that person doesn't work here anymore. How do I switch that out again? We don't even offer that product anymore. I haven't updated the blog in over a year. What's going on? So just having a longer view of, is this a temporary solution or is this something that we're actually gonna keep up with ourselves? It's a good question to ask. There is a surprise third part of this, which is, it's not enough when employees change. You might have, like that magazine did, a very creative person that's very eager to make changes and do his thing. That's great. And oh my gosh, they're keeping the site updated. It's looking beautiful. How can we live with that? Oh, they just got hired out from us. What's the password? Like, how do we do this? Oh my gosh, they were doing so much within that. How do we do this? So the idea of transferring that knowledge, I'm just gonna say this, if you use Squarespace as a group, it needs to be done kind of within accountability, because the amount of times a creative person that did this for a small company leaves and the company is left in the lurch, they have no idea what to do. It happens a lot. We have a lot of people come to us that says, first things first, we want you to support our site, but we need you to hack our site because we don't know anything how to get into it. It's like, I get it, I've seen it. So that's basically it in summary, y'all, but just to kind of review, Squarespace is not gonna be enough usually if you're a site that needs strategy, which you probably are, that you don't have all the content to support it, you need a specific plugin, you need outside advice, you need a creative decision, you don't have the time to build it, you don't have the time to sustain it, you don't have the accountability to pass on that knowledge. Squarespace might not be the solution. Again, if you're able to solve those things, Squarespace as a tool is incredible. But, and this is my ending dad joke, if you're a round peg of a client, don't force yourself to fit into a Squarespace. That's it. That's my talk, though.
One Quick Question is brought to you by Infomedia. So at Infomedia, we are a web service company, and that means we do whatever you need for your website, whether that is shooting video, taking photos, writing copy, or incorporating digital marketing, or even redesigning your whole site. So to meet with us, just email quickquestion@infomedia.com, and we will set you up with the right people to talk to. The One Quick Question podcast is developed and hosted by me, Carrie Rollwagon. You can find show notes, including links to what we talked about on the podcast today, and links to tickets to One Quick Question Live, which is free, by the way. I don't know if I said that, at infomedia.com/quickquestion. Our producer is Elena Harmon. Our theme music is by Brad Davis, and sound engineering is done by our in-house media team here at Infomedia, including Paul Bryant, who's in the studio with me today. Hey, Paul. If you need website support, marketing advice, or you're interested in building a new website, give us a call at 205-823-4440 or email quickquestion@infomedia.com. And we like to leave you with this thought. A real expert helps to clarify, not confuse. So don't take website advice from someone who can't give you a straight answer.